All right, well, I hope everybody had engaging conversation. I know in group A, we were right in the middle of a sentence and we got pulled back into the main group. So I apologize for the speaker in group A. But we will, just like we did for communication, we'll give each group an opportunity to report out on their conversations, 5 minutes per group. I will start again with group A, and I had Elisa Powell that describe in group A.
Oops, sorry, had to rearrange my screens. You know, when you come back in, it's
no problem.
I lost y'all. Yes, group A, we seem to have two topics that were discussed the most. We kept circling back around. So one is for these delegate meetings that are coming up, because we are the delegate council now, and we've learned that these 4 meetings a year, 3 in person and 1 3 virtual and 1 in person. There was a questions about logistics. Not every organization, not just societies, but organizations who have employees especially, they can't always be going to something in person, especially on that organization's dime. There was a discussion about, limitations of being in person, and as far as financial time off. And then it was suggested perhaps in this wonderful age that we could do hybrid type of things for that annual meeting in May. And then, of course, the other virtual ones would not be as problematic. The other topic of discussion was, would the right people be in the room at these meetings? If the topic is about newsletters, well, then you want your newsletter editor to be in the room, not the delegate. Or if it's technical, something maybe the delegate isn't comfortable talking about or has knowledge of, but there's technical collaboration that could happen. How do you pass information, or how do you get the right people in the right room? Societies have a diverse membership from could be from anywhere. There was mention of military families who are moved around. Of course, Florida has their retirees. So organization by topic would be important to this group, that if you were to schedule some kind of meetings surrounding topics, or as I believe we will see in the higher logic forums, they will be separated by topic. Topics such as technology, education, board development, and volunteers. These are important topics to society members and organizations. Those with libraries, those with large societies, those with small societies. Then we got into another smaller discussion talking about how large is a large society. Can large societies help struggling societies that tend to be smaller with less resources? Could a mentorship program be involved with that kind of collaboration between successful societies and those who are struggling a little bit over certain issues? So those were our topics that we were discussing, and we all look forward to more discussion on these.
All right, thank you. Group B is Sherry.
We had a really great discussion on who they want to collaborate with, what types of societies or organizations. And at first it was overwhelmingly libraries, which I thought was really interesting that libraries was the top. And they were talking about the problem is for those that have libraries, they're not open. What are other groups doing that have libraries? How do you work with the local board? Just what are their best practices when it comes to their libraries? Ideas. And it was really interesting as we went through these different ideas of theirs and different needs, is that everybody was sharing and collaborating what they do. And so just what we want to happen with the delegate council was happening in Group B. They were sharing ideas on what they did, how they worked those different challenges and problems out. So they really, really want to work together for best practices. And then the second group was similar organizational size. So that's what we began with, was similar organizational size. And then the question was, well, what about geographical size? Some of the geographical areas may be big, but there's smaller societies within. Some of the geographical areas may be tiny, but there's a lot of organizations within. So do we want to break things up like that? We talked about location, interest, and size is maybe something to break the groups up into. But then towards the end, as we're all sharing wonderful ideas on how to learn from each other, best practices, how do you do this? How do you do that? We kind of came to the conclusion that we can learn from everybody. All organizations, groups, types, societies, they all have good things to offer. Whether they're a bigger organization, they've got things to offer smaller organizations. So we kind of came to the conclusion that, hey, we can all work together and all learn from each other. But I really loved the fact that they were sharing and helping each other in this group in the short time that we had, figure out how to increase their membership or how to charge for sessions on their website or whatever the case may be. They were really just jumping in there helping each other. So just what we want to happen was happening in our breakout group.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you. In Group C. Oh.
Yes. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, Sherry, the way you finished it was a perfect segue for where most of the discussion in our group focused on. It's this idea that we can learn from all societies. So when we answered the poll question, our top response was all. And so we had some good conversation around, well, what does that look like? What are the type of things that we can learn from each other? And there was some great examples shared, just as y'all had in your group, where I think it was Vicki Madsen described how she has something she wants to learn from a smaller society. They were able to grow their membership during this pandemic, and they're being a larger society wasn't. So what can they learn from the smaller society? What can we learn from libraries? So a lot of discussion about the opportunities we have to learn, no matter what type of society you are or organization you are. And then we segue into how does that transfer into things being represented in Higher Logic? Would there be flexibility to dip in and out of being able to have these conversations with different types of organizations? And so I think it definitely was the consensus among our delegates that would be a wonderful thing to have in Higher Logic, is to be able to exchange with multiple societies, no matter the size. Then we also talked about some of the ways Higher Logic could be organized. So there was a great recommendation to think about organizing it by topics, but then within those topics, subdivide it by size, because there may be situations where the conversation will differ on the same topic, just depending on what size of an organization you are. So y'all have already shared some of these topics, technology, volunteers, membership, education. We had a whole list coming through. Sponsorships, fundraising, grants. I think we're basically putting together this Higher Logic structure for everyone. So that was a really key discussion that we had. Then Greg asked a question that, as the facilitator, that I think really spurred a lot of interest. He asked, what else would you like to see from NGS regarding collaboration? So we had a long discussion about all these different other ways that they thought NGS could help. So that includes now national speakers list. And we talked some about the fact, well, there are these other resources out there, but maybe people don't know where they are. So can NGS play a role in helping facilitate organizations and societies knowing where to go for speakers? Programming, facilitating partnerships with schools. There was a great example shared of, I think it was Diane McKinney, that she wants to prepare her society members to be speakers. So what type of support can NGS provide for that? I love that one. An annual e-conference. So we had this great group of suggestions coming through. So I would say ours focused on collaborating with all, and then coming up with additional ideas for NGS to help provide additional support. And I think our delegate group was very happy to see the NGS is really offering so much support for us as a group of delegates. So
I think you hit on, I took a couple of notes, I think you hit on a really good takeaway, which is these Higher Logic communities, the conversations that you're having
Mhm.
Within those communities, the conversations that you'll have at the virtual meetings, the in-person meetings, will trigger development. Things will be
Yes.
developed out of those conversations that become resources for the entire community.
Yeah.
And that's a big purpose of convening this group. And I would expect that to happen. I think there is, there was a lot of diverse conversations. I don't think we landed at a complete blueprint for how we're going to organize all those communities, but that's okay. I think we've got a good start. I do think this will trigger some work on the staff side to come back to this group. The larger the delegate community that might have not been able to participate in the workshop, and maybe there's some surveys in our future. So I will thank you guys in advance for responding to some electronic surveys as we configure these communities. I think there's also some additional conversation that we'll have about what happens, how the virtual or the in-person meetings and the collaboration that happens there will be configured potentially differently than the online communities, or what common threads will be connected between the two. And then, something that I, want to wrap my head around how to best facilitate is doing both things, connecting the organizations that look like me versus organizations that don't look like me, because there's value in both of those things. And what are the characteristics, and how can we configure groupings that facilitate that, whether it's subsections within communities or nested conversations or discussion threads in communities that are topical, but then also connect the common thread of organization that's in my region or organization that's the same size. So there's a lot of food for thought, and I appreciate that. I see Richard has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that within the higher logic framework of communicating groups, that there's a way to sunset groups that no longer have a function. We do need to renew ourselves from time to time. I mean, we had a discussion in Group B about we're still doing things we did 40 years ago when we all got started in this, or many organizations did. And some of these are now basically obsolete. And I think conversations become obsolete or stale. And so there should be a way every 2 or 3 years, perhaps, to review the existing discussions and keep them fluid.
Great point. Thank you. Anybody else have comments or questions about what conversation occurred in their group or any of the report outs?
I have just a quick question. Are the delegates here today all from local genealogy groups, or are some state groups?
I don't want to talk out of turn. I think there's a pretty good mix. Someone else might have a better idea of the composition, though.
Yeah, there is a mix of state societies. There's a mix of local societies. There's a mix of specialty ethnic societies. There are libraries also represented on today's call. Not sure if we had any archives or museums register for the Delegate Council workshop, but obviously we have archive and museum member organizations as well. But there is a mix, Susie.
I will also say in Group A, we talked about the library archives thought that they were being overwhelmed by societies here today. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, societies is the type of organization that is the most numerous members at the current time for NGS.
There is a quickly approaching threshold of libraries, however. We have more than 100 libraries or member organizations of NGS. Fewer delegates that have been identified yet, but there is a good number.
I just have a question quickly. In our local area, we have a few specialty societies that I would like to see our society do a lot more collaborative work with. For instance, the Hispanic genealogical societies in our area. We have a large Hispanic, society here, population in Southern California. And I would really like to see us do some kind of joint work with their smaller society and get them, more people encouraged to get in younger and get into genealogy to better what their ethnic background is. And I want to know how to approach that without sounding offensive.
One of the things that we did in Grand Prairie is when I was elected president of the historical organization, I contacted the city's new director of diversity, and that office gave me all kinds of resources. In fact, more than I could really deal with, and that has spilled over into the Genealogical Society. So, as my kind of tongue-in-cheek comment was, as people equipped to deal with diversity, we make excellent genealogists.
Thank you for the suggestion. That's very good. Thank you.
Well, that's a good example of the kind of interaction that the online communities will facilitate. Now, that was a pretty acute question, which is fine, but that will, making those connections is what the community is all about. And when you have conversations and discussion threads that are useful, that then can be referenced in the future, the community will also facilitate that. It all does kind of come back to meaningful configuration, and then getting everybody comfortable in kind of interacting in that environment. So that will come as the communities get rolled out over the summer.
Ethan, if I could, that one example from Christina and John in making that connection, very practical example of collaboration within our own community. But in both of those cases, Christina is looking to collaborate with partners in her local community. John's made those connections. There is this other thing we talked about in at least one of the breakouts, which is how do we as organizations collaborate outside of our own genealogical community? This is a very big and important role for our organizations, developing partnerships and collaborative activities beyond supporting each other in operating our organizations. But how do we actually make collaborative work on behalf of genealogy happen? And those are just two really fantastic examples of where our ability to connect with other groups and collaborate with other groups extends their reach, and it extends our reach. And I fully applaud you for thinking of the concept, and for John for suggesting a way to make that happen.
Okay, well, I appreciate all of the conversation. We are just about at time for another break. We will break now for just about 11 minutes, reconvene at 3:20 Eastern, where we'll kick off the council breakout session. So see everybody in about 11 minutes.